Hey, Tony Gaskins here, CEO of MyMentor.life. Hey, I wanted to pop in, and on Friday, sometimes I try to do a video for the men. And I wanted to answer this question that I get all the time is, Tony, how did you change your life? How did you mature? And I'll be honest with you. Now, when I talk to guys, a lot of times I'm talking to guys and we talk about, life in our past. And I realize that I've been through a lot, did a lot more than a lot of guys in the way of bad choices. But see, everyone has their thing. So you have some guys who they were using substances and really gone in that area of their life. Me, I never was that type. I was on the other end of it, in the streets hustling, serving, but I wasn't a user. I've never used, and it just wasn't my thing. And the reason why is because I grew up with people who did, and seeing that and seeing what came of that, it was like, whoa. But then on the other side of it, the guys who were supplying it, I saw their life, and I didn't really see much negative coming from it. A lot of them never got caught, and then some of them did, but the ones who did, it was just like they were doing it at a huge level. So it got caught up with like the feds and fed time, and then you had the guys who just were kind of ignorant and showing off, and then they got caught. But you had the type of guy who was smart, in the sense that he could have been doing something else had he been shown another way, or had a mentor or somebody to kind of speak into his life. But he ended up in the streets, and he made a lot of money, and eventually transitioned in a clean way, having never been caught. So I saw that, and it intrigued me. And then with women, it was kind of standard. So growing up, I grew up with my father. Somebody asked me, Tony, how did you have, a mother and a father and still go wrong? What you have to realize about having a mother and a father is that it's not, a mother and a father doesn't mean a perfect household. It doesn't mean that they're perfect. It doesn't mean that they know what they're doing. My mother and father met when my mom was 8th grade, my dad was in 9th grade. So they knew nothing about love. And my father, he lost his mother at the age of 7 or 8. And then his father came back home to raise them, and it was 12 of them. And my dad was the youngest of the 12. My mother, her mother, probably had, I don't know, 2, 3, or 4 different marriages or baby fathers. And my mother was the 12th. And she was the youngest of the 12. And so my mother and father kind of were raised in a situation to where, imagine, and think about this literally, once you hit number 3, you really start to struggle. Okay? Back then, in those days, women were, there was no contraceptives and all of that stuff. So it's like, if you doing the act, you paying the price. And their bodies was much more fertile because they didn't have all of the processed foods and every other thing that works against all of the radiation from the cell phones and whatever else may be working against a woman's body and fertilization. They didn't have all of that. So they was, fertile. You hear me? And the clinics and all of those things that a lot of women have readily available today wasn't as big of a thing in the 50s and 60s. And so both of my parents were the youngest of 12. So they didn't get a lesson on love. They didn't get a lesson on a healthy household. They did the absolute best they could. But when you're growing up, it's no different than any household. To be honest with you, I've seen people from single parent households do better than people from 2-parent households. And the reason why is because with a single parent household, it's one way of thinking. It's my way or the highway. It's one way. And so you see this one person, mother or father, perfecting themselves and working on themselves and building themselves. And that could be a lot more stable than watching two people fuss, fight, and argue all the time and have two different ways of thinking, being enemy behind the lines, to where you have mom saying, hey, do this, do this. Not speaking specifically of my situation, but this is what happens in a lot of two-parent homes is mom is like, hey, do this, don't tell your dad. Dad's like, hey, you could do this, don't tell your mom. And so the son or daughter growing up is like, do y'all like each other? Do y'all trust each other? Is this what a relationship is? Is how much y'all argue? So what happens is, for me, I gravitated to the streets because that's who was making the money. That's who had the ladies. And I played sports. So I was a football player in the sense of always led my league from the time I was little all the way up through high school. Always was in the top 5 running backs. I was a running back. And I went to college on a full football scholarship as a running back. And I played basketball. I always led the league in scoring, or in high school in the top 5 in my county. I was a scorer. I kind of played like a Allen Iverson type style. Couldn't really shoot, but if you standing in front of me, you couldn't guard me. I was real quick and shifty. So I was an athlete by every sense of the word. I had a 38 and a half inch vertical without really stretching. I ran a 4.36 in the 40 in college. I was 170 pounds. I bench pressed 340 pounds. So I was the only player on my team to bench press 200% of their body weight. I was an athlete in every sense of the word. And so I looked up to the athletes, and so how the athletes living. They're not being one woman men. They're not focusing on one woman. They got all the ladies. And that's what they're pushing, and that's what they're preaching. And then you look at the guys in the streets. They got all the jewelry. They got all the fancy cars. They got the money. They take their money. They give it to the star athlete at high school, at the college, and make sure he's taken care of. So it was, you an athlete, you a street dude. And so what happened, what I saw is everybody first try to make it in athletics, because you're going to keep your freedom if you make it in athletics. Then and you're a ladies man in athletics, because that's what came with it, because all of the women wanted the star football player, the star basketball player. So the guys who didn't play sports, they got second, third, fourth dibs, and the ladies was after and trying to position themselves to get either the star athlete or the street dude, the star street dude. And sometimes they had to share women, sometimes they traded women. That's just how it went. And literally guys walk up to you, hey, let's trade girlfriends. And you be like, okay, all right, well, all right, you can date her, I date who you date. It literally happened, between the athletes and the street guys. And women just was kind of out there. And so the way women were seen as just kind of disposable, it was unwritten law. And there was no women who were protesting against it. It was like everybody knew this is what it is. Like, you get you a man if he gonna have money, or if he gonna have looks or status, or if he this or that. You get you a man, you prance him around, you be happy with him, you spend his money, or you eat off of his clout, or you look good because your dude the star athlete. But you gonna get cheated on. When you get cheated on, you go fight that other woman, whoop her in front of everybody, then she know this your man, then your man get to take you back and flaunt you around to the next woman he cheat on you with. That was the standard, and that's what everybody adhered to. It wasn't any protest against that. And so for those reasons, that goes much deeper than we probably got time to go into. But you got to remember what African Americans in the South, in Florida, where I was raised, come from. And so you come from a lot of pain and separation and drama and issues and low self-esteem and self-worth issues. So you combating all of that. And so I bought right into it because I wasn't necessarily looking up to my dad. My dad was a pastor for 14 years of my life. He was assistant pastor from like 7 to 14, and then from like 14 to 21 he was a pastor of his own church. And then him and my mother went through their situations, and they got a divorce, and he stopped preaching. And so probably from 18 years old, when they started going through, it was kind of like, as a man, you have a father, you look up to your father. But when you see that Superman has kryptonite, then you don't really worship or, idolize or praise man. And so when you see your own father fall, and so you got to realize this what every man's seeing, because no man is perfect. So every man is seeing a man who failed, and in some way of life, in some aspect of life. So when you take the guys with a whole lot of money, they typically have issues in other ways, like they can't maintain a relationship, or they have substance issues with the way they use substances. And then when you take guys who may not have money, they may also struggle with relationships or struggle with substances, or so it's like everybody's struggling in their own way, and nobody is fully healthy and whole. And you see all these holes in man. And so you out there as a young man, and you looking and you trying to find your way, and you choose what appeals to you. So I didn't have any, real pain. Like I had a great life growing up. My parents, they worked. They had a job my whole life. They didn't have any substance issues. So there was no drinking, smoking, cursing. It was a healthy household. So I didn't really have any problems. Like when it comes to finances and things like that a lot of men go through. What I was doing was really just searching for myself, because I grew up so sheltered. My parents went to the church when I was 6. So when you get out into the real world, you looking around and you trying to find out what's what. But you got a basis, you got a foundation, and you know what you believe, but you're curious about what else is out there. So when I went out there, it was almost like a double agent. Like I'm trying to figure out, what is this lifestyle about? And I tried to be a athlete and tried to, I played football, and I redshirted my freshman year. Came my redshirt freshman year, that next year, I started in that game. I had 2 fumbles. From the time I had them 2 fumbles, my coach never started me again. So now when you relegated to 3rd, 4th string after being the starter, first string, it's like now you're dealing with your psyche. Now it's like your ego. Now, how do you handle this type of adversity? How do you climb up out of this? And you're not who the coach wants you to be. And you don't have the tools or the ability to change it, because that's not how you were raised. So going hard in sports, it always came easy to me. I never really had to do a bunch of extra stuff, grunt work, and my dad was never hard on me. He didn't push me in that. He stopped when I was 12 or 13, like critiquing me, because I yelled at him one time about it, and he was just like, okay, cool. He didn't play sports coming up. He had no guidance in that area of playing sports, organized sports. So he dropped out of high school his 12th grade year, took the GED, went to the Army. So totally different situation than it is with me and my 2 boys, my 2 sons. Having been a college athlete, my wife was a college athlete. So they got a different understanding and pursuit and love for sports that wasn't instilled in my household. It was like, hey, we just gonna support you, sign you up, we're gonna go to all your games, but you don't have to do this if you don't want to do it. So when I got to college, and it was like a battle between who really wanted, I didn't really want it. It's just I'm just faster than y'all, I'm just better than y'all, but if you want it more than me, you could have it. If you're gonna put in all this time doing film, all this time in the weight room, go ahead, buddy. And that's what a coach wants. And my mind just wasn't there. So my next option after that was the streets. It was like, okay, you saw the athletes, you saw some of them go pro. From where I'm from, some athletes went pro, and then after that, you saw the street dudes. So the sports stuff ain't working out. What's next? You saw the street stuff. Never met anybody growing up that had made academics work, that had made an education work. And that's a sad reality. Never met a doctor or a lawyer or even anybody with a college degree that looked like me, that I sat down, that I could look at their life and like be envious of their life and aspire to be where they are. Never seen that. Most you'll see is a school teacher, but I didn't even have black male school teachers. That wasn't even a thing. That came later, after I got out of college, before I started seeing black male school teachers. It's a real thing, so that's what you have to realize. Everybody upbringing is different, and everybody have different struggles. So I talked to some men and they slept in the car, they slept outside. I talked to some men, parents was addicts. Talked to some men, they went through a whole lot, at the hands of their father. And so everybody's story is different, but there's some principles to change. There are some principles to change that kind of go across the board. And those principles to change, for me, it really, what I grew to understand is that as a man, you have to accept full responsibility for your life. So what I realized is I had to forgive my parents for the things that they didn't teach me, because they didn't know it to teach. They didn't know how to raise a child because they were not raised. They just grew. And you get feedback here and there from your parents, but not in an active, hey, hop in the car, we're going to piano lessons, we're going to football practice, we're going to basketball practice, we're sitting down and doing your homework. It wasn't that. It was like, hey, you better do this, hey, you better do that, hey, you better stay away from this, hey, you better stay away from that. Just kind of little conversations in passing, but they were not raised. They were not trained up the way they should be, so that when they were old, they will not depart from it, the way the good book says. They just grew. So in knowing how to communicate with a child, my mother didn't know how to do that. My father didn't know how to do that. So, my dad would talk long form, would talk long form, hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. No child is going to have an attention span that is an hour plus and understand what you're saying. So I really picked up no lessons in that way. And then my mother, she talked short form in quotes, in sound bites, but didn't explain what it meant. So I really picked up nothing then. I didn't start to understand this stuff until I was an adult and hadn't been through everything. But that's not their fault, because they didn't know. They just did the best they knew. Let me keep a roof over his head. Let me keep clothes on his back. Let me keep shoes on his feet. Have him a car to ride in. Have him food to eat. And if you got that, you got everything. So me having that, my life was better than anybody I knew. And so here, as a man, I had to realize a man accepts full responsibility for his life. Meaning you got to stop blaming your mom for what she did and didn't do. You got to stop blaming your dad for what he did and didn't do. You got to stop blaming the government for what they do and don't do. You got to stop blaming other races for what they do and don't do. You got to stop blaming the people who, hurt you and did you wrong. Your ex-girlfriend, your ex-wife, your ex-business partner. You got to stop blaming other people, and you got to accept full responsibility for your life. Meaning that if it is meant to be, it is up to me. And I had to do that. So I literally, I'm like, in my heart, in my mind, I'm like, Daddy, I forgive you. Mama, I forgive you. Like, you ain't do nothing wrong to me. You were amazing. Did everything you could do. Did it the best way you knew how. And it's not your fault for what you did not know. Hey, when I was in middle school, the Ku Klux Klan came to my school. I remember my cousin. We in the South, we in Florida, and Ku Klux Klan. I'm in middle school, so this like this literally like 1998, maybe 96, 97 at the earliest. I probably ninth grade for me was probably 1998, something like that. And so in middle school, you're looking at 96, 97, and to see the Ku Klux Klan, which I had only seen on movies. And so my dad used to always watch all these movies, Mississippi Burning, Ghost of Mississippi, A Time to, all those type of movies. And my mom, she used to yell at him like, "Stop watching them movies, man. You gonna make them hate. You gonna make them other people, Can't say everything on all the videos. And it did, it made you feel some type of way when you watching what your people come through and what they struggle through. It's like, man. And then, so when you go out, you got a different lens and you looking at people, and anybody that has any of that in them of the opposite race, you sense it. You pick up on it, even when it's, real subtle. You pick up on it because you've been watching it on these movies. And so then to see the Ku Klux Klan, and then it was this thing. I remember my cousin, he was in high school, and he had to move in. He had to live with us because his life was way worse than mine. Never really knew his dad. His mom was just over the top, just really like, I remember seeing her pick up. You used to have them phones that was like a square, and it was heavy. And you pick up the handle off of it, so it had the square bottom, and you had the little thing where you dial like this, and then they made it where you could punch the buttons, but you pick up the handle and put it to your ear. Well, that big old phone, it's like this. It's heavy. It probably feel like about 10 pounds. I remember one time being in his house, and she got mad at him. She picked up that phone and she threw it, and he was running, and he almost about to hit the curb. And right before he hit the curb, boom! That heavy big old phone hit him in the elbow. And then, his mom, after having him and his sister, started dealing with women. And so that was like a shock because, it was still new. It's like, back then, it's like, being with your same gender, it was frowned upon. And it was like, whoa, what's going on now? And so all that stuff, it take a toll. And then, so he had to come stay with us, and I remember he was dating of the outside of his race, and I remember asking him, I'm like, man, why you date them? And he was like, you too young, man, but when you older, you'll understand. And I was like, I'm never doing that, because I was just probably 6th grade, he probably was 11th, 12th grade, and sure enough, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, they started coming. Like them, and he played sports. He was a football player on the team, good. They started coming. And what I started to realize is the women of the other race, we were forbidden fruit, but because we were the star athletes, because we was on the football team, they wanted to be associated because they wanted the best. Now, if you broke, busted, and disgusted, no clout to your name, they ain't paying you no attention. And that was just the reality of it. And so I remember one situation was short-lived, but the dad and mom went to the girl and said, listen, our maid, our housekeeper is of that race. We're not racist. We're not against them. As you can see with our housekeeper, we don't have anything against them, but we don't think it's smart for you to date them because you know how it is. A lot of people not like us. A lot of people are, in fact, racist. So that's what they told, the daughter. Daughter came and told me, and I was like, hey, I told you. I said, hey, I told you. You keep trying to, come talk to me and all this about your family different. Your family different. I say, okay, now you heard it for yourself. I say, hey, God bless you. And before that situation, there was another situation where the young lady, really, really liked me, and then my dad was a pastor at the time. Her dad went to my dad's church and had a meeting with him and sat down with my dad and said, hey, listen, my daughter and your son liking each other. And he said, but listen, and this right here, like 2000, year 2000, new millennium, year 2001, 2001. I'm number one in the county. So, we one of the biggest counties in Florida at that time. I don't live there anymore, but I'm number one in the county in rushing. I'm rushing for over 10 yards a carry. And so I touch the ball, it's a first down or a touchdown, literally. And so I'm in the paper every day. And so obviously this young lady, she see me, she heard of me. They was a rival school. When we played them in basketball, I give them 25. They didn't have a football team. But I'm in the paper every day. And we end up, talking, young puppy love. And her dad went to my dad and said, hey, yeah, our son, my daughter, your son, calling themselves liking each other, and listen, I have nothing. My dad kind of told me the conversation, how it went, and he said, I have nothing against you guys. My one of my closest friends is black, and like, I have black people over in my house all the time. You can eat dinner, like spend the night, anything, okay? But like, this is the thing. You know how it is. Not everyone is like me. Like, if my daughter dates your son, she won't get her volleyball scholarship. When the coach comes to visit the house, if he sees a picture of her and your son, her scholarship is. And when she graduates from college, if she's with your son, she won't get hired. She won't get a job if the person interviewing her knows her husband is black. And listen, this 2001 is 2002. Now, me personally, I didn't really care. I honestly did not care. It just was, you a young man, and these people coming at you, like all these different women coming at you. So really, I was dating white, black, Mexican, this, that, Asian, because I'm an athlete. And so everybody was coming at you. And that was distracting. So what I had to realize is, I had to say, you know what? I got to forgive the government, the institution. I got to get past that. I got to stop blaming racism and discrimination for where my life is. I'm making $8.50 an hour, $9.50 an hour at the time. So I relinquish my parents. I forgive them. I will forgive the institution, the system, what have you. Okay, that's out the way. It's on me. What you gonna do, Tony? Next thing, what I had to do is I had to get some guidelines for living. Now, this may mean something different for every man, but I had to get guidelines for living because I was still in the streets at 23 years old. And I met my wife, and she was absolutely amazing. As you can see, our book coming out April 7th, entitled A Woman's Influence, published by Simon & Schuster, which is a Big Five publisher. Big Five meaning the Big Five publishers in the world, the top five. Simon & Schuster, one of them. So it's an honor to be working with them. And I met my wife. I was 21 years old. She was amazing. But I was trying to be me and do what I was doing, so I ran her off at first. 6 months later, we bumped back into each other through happenstance, God looking down and sent me a blessing. Knew I needed her. She came back. By that time, I was in the streets. I had went back to the streets, and she gave me a little bit of time. She gave me a little time. It probably, I feel like maybe a month she gave me. And then it was kind of like, you got to get out of these streets. And then a little while later, we had a son on the way. And I say, you know what? You're my wife. And I've been living in sin, been doing stuff the wrong way. I'm going to marry you because you're not a baby mama. You're a wife. So I proposed to her on Christmas. And then March 30th, we got married. April 26th, my son came 2.5 months early, 2 pounds, 10 ounces, was put in an intensive care unit. So I'm looking for a reason to get back to the streets because that's where the glory is. That's where the limelight is. That's where you somebody, that's where you shining. Working on these people job who, replace you in a New York minute, New York second. Wasn't no glory there. And just being young and you looking up to the rappers. So at that point in time, my role model was Plies, because he's from Florida, and Jeezy. And so that's all I was listening to was the Real Testament, I think it was Plies, and then Thug Motivation, I think, with Jeezy. And that's all I was listening to. I had an Impala, it was 2005, this was 2007. I was in college, still trying to, do something with that, trying to go a certain way. I was a criminology major, but in the streets, hustling. And I would be in the classroom with a quarter pound of the loud and a 380, which is a hand situation, okay? I don't know what all catching up here on this here YouTube. And so I'm literally sitting in class with a quarter pound and a 380 in my backpack. And I'm writing all my notes in my mind, because that's how my mind works. Is just how you see me talk for an hour a day. It just, my mind is sharp. And so I would listen, and then I would go take the test off of what I heard in class. And I would get B's and C's easy. If I studied, I could have been straight A's, no A minuses, like my oldest son, who been doing that for the last 3-4 years now. But I didn't want to study. I didn't have time to study. When I leave out of school, and sometimes I got to get out of class early because if somebody hit my line and they need some, hey, what you need, how much you need, I'm to you. And so I'm coming out of class and I'm going and doing that. So at this point in time, man, I went back to the streets, and my wife, she said, listen, I told you before we got married, ain't gonna be none of that street play. You're not gonna be out there in the streets because we trying to build a family. And I'm like, you wanna be broke? And she's like, I'd rather be broke than you doing something like that and then end up having to go up the road for 6-7 years. She's like, one of my friends I work with just lost her dude to the penitentiary for 7 years for doing the same thing that you doing right now. So you next. And I was like, I thought she was playing. And so I went on ahead, tried to get off what I had to get off got off of the last little bit, and then came home one day, and she came home and she left. And I begged her, told her I'm done. And literally I had just sold everything I had anyway. So technically at that moment I was done. But I'm not gonna re-up if you're gonna leave me. So come on back, I'm done. And when she came back that night, we met back up at our apartment. That night I got robbed. At that time I had an Impala. It was 2007. My Impala was 2005, so it was still a baby. It was 2 years old, still brand new, body style still the same in 2007. So you couldn't tell the difference unless you knew when you had one. And I had put some 22s on it, some 22-inch rims. So I was the only one in the city riding like that at the time. And I got robbed that night, probably by, like a local gang, like somebody who I had sold some work to and shorted, or they just was watching me and I was shining too hard and they wanted to come take it. And I had got into a little something, a couple weeks before that. So I really, honestly, I'm like, I could have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different enemies who did this. I didn't know who did it. And I kind of got an idea later, but it's like, what you gonna do? Like, I got a wife and a son that's in an intensive care unit. And so at that point, I realized that's when I needed standards to live by. And so my father, he had fell from grace in his life. He had gone through a divorce, and I still love him and respect him. So I reached out to him to learn about to learn about marriage, to learn about how to be a good man, how to be a good husband. So I talked to him on that. And my wife allowed him to be my life coach because she told me, you got to get coaching. Like, you got to get some help if we're going to get back together, and you got to get back in the church. So I went to the church on Sunday. Got robbed on Saturday night, which was like early Sunday morning. Went to the church later on Sunday, rededicated my life to Christ. I knew Christ my whole life, but just was a prodigal son at the time, and rededicated my life. And then I started reading my Bible, and I would read 2 chapters a day. My dad told me, he said, look, read the book of Proverbs. That's the book of wisdom. Now, after you read Proverbs, go to the book of John, because you got Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. He said, start in John, because Matthew, Mark, Luke, they telling the same story just from different vantage points. So start in the book of John, read the book of John, 2 chapters a day, 1 if you can't digest the whole 2. And before you start reading, pray for wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. And so I said that prayer every time before I read. I read 2 chapters, and he said, read all the way up to the book of Revelation, and then stop, and then go back, do Proverbs again, go back to John, all the way back up to Revelation. So you're a baby, so you just need formula. You on milk. You ain't on steak and potatoes when you first get in that Holy Bible. So the book of Proverbs just shook me to my core. I had read it when I was younger, but it said something totally different to me as an adult, when it just talked about men and just staying away from the wrong type of women, and not following the crowd, and not being out just seeking the shed blood and cause issue for no reason. So it talked to womanizers, it talked to street thugs, it talked to you in Proverbs, and that's what I was doing. And so I'm like, wow, this thing jumping off the page at me. And then from John to Revelation, it was a bunch of wisdom. And then in the book of Ephesians, in the 5th chapter, that's where the scripture about husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church, that right there just that floored me. Because when I looked at the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, and then I drew the comparison to how I'm supposed to love my wife, I'm like, whoa. So what I did is I forgave, I stopped pointing the blame, and then I got standards for living. And then what I understood is, I believe it's from the book of Proverbs, where it says your gifts will make room for you and bring you before great men. And it was kind of talking about like a literal gift, like you got a gift and like a present, and you bring it to the king or to the great men, and they'll let you through, and they want to talk to you and to receive your gift. But metaphorically speaking, your gift, like the present that God has given you, the gift God has given you that comes to you naturally, you use that, and that will make room for you. So I had to sit down and look at my gifts and say, okay, what can I do? And I had already wrote my first book, and I wrote my book, got a royalty check for $300, and I was hoping the check was going to be like $12,000. So you can imagine, if you hoping it's going to be $12,000 and it turned out to be $300, that's a big. I got 3% of what I was expecting to get. So I'm like, man, I'm going back to the streets. And so I had tried to change at first, but then I realized, okay, look, you got to go back. Now you got to go back to using your gifts. So then that's what I said. I said, you know what? I'm going to let everything that was working against me, the negative things that was working against me, I'm going to let it work for me. So when I was in the streets and I was hustling, I literally just got out there, with the work and started marketing. You know what I mean? Just, hey, let me put this in your nose. Hey, you see, I got it. Hey, holla at me. I'll go my number. Let me know what you need, what all your homeboys need. So I got out there and I was marketing, and I said, okay, now you got to do the same thing with this book. So you wrote your book, and my book was called What Daddy Never Told His Little Girl. And it really was because I was a writer, I'm a writer in the sense that I know how to write without getting writer's block. But then I had a lot of wisdom because just the way my father would talk to me, it started to click as I got older. Because he talked to me in long form, an hour to 3 hours. The way I talk to y'all every day, that's how my dad, he could talk for hours. And so it started to click as an adult. And so I had a lot of wisdom, and my wisdom is beyond my years. Like, I just turned 36, but I have clients nearly 70. You know, a couple of my clients might be in their 70s. So God granted me a gift of wisdom, and that's something that I actually prayed for. And in Proverbs, it tell you, if you need wisdom, pray for it. Like, wisdom crying out, looking for you, but you got to ask for it. So every day I would pray a prayer that said, Lord, double my faith. Lord, double my wisdom. And in doing so, I received. And so my faith was doubled in the sense that I felt like I could get on Oprah with no agent, with no manager, country, come from nothing. My faith said I could get on Oprah. So in 2007, when I wrote my book, I started pitching myself, and I created a thing to where I made business cards up for my book, and I got out there and I just started work. I was handing them out at the mall. They'd kick me out the mall because you can't solicit in the mall. I stand in the parking lot. Everybody going in their car. I'm handing a card of What Daddy Never Told the Little Girl. I had a picture on there, picture of me, picture of the book, little synopsis on the book, where you could get the book. And I just hand them out. And I marketed my book like it was the best thing since sliced bread. It literally was like a diamond in a brown bag instead of being a cubic zirconia in a Tiffany's box, which is what a mentor said to me later. I had a mentor for a couple months that I met online on MySpace, and he said that to me one time. But the same way I used to be out there with the work on the wrong side of the line, pushing it, and I would work 21 hours out of the 24 when I was in the streets. I mean, you hit me at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., boom, I'm out there to you. Here you go, what you need. Hey, give my money. And I didn't turn nothing down. Some people, they're like, oh, I'm just doing this quantity. You know, it got to be this much or more. $5, give it to me. $10, give it to me. Okay, $1,000, give it to me. Like, from 5 and up, I wasn't letting nothing go. And so when I came to the right side of things, I brought that same hustler ambition, and I outwork everybody. Like, when I come on this YouTube, it ain't many YouTubers that do an hour video 7 days a week. I outwork everybody. You're not gonna outwork me. And so that's what I said. It's no excuses. It's no excuses. I'ma show up. I'm gonna show up. And I just started doing that. And every day I would pitch myself to Oprah, Tyra Banks, and CNN. And so CNN, not Fox News, so that lets you know what side I'm on. But I ain't know nothing. I'm not into all that politics and stuff. Jesus is my politician. You hear me? Instead, I vote for Jesus. But I would pitch to them three, and I said, I want to be on CNN getting interviewed. I want to be on Oprah getting interviewed. I want to be on Tyra Banks getting interviewed. It took me 2 years. And in 2009, Chris Brown and Rihanna happened. I had been getting knowledge. What I did, I took Jesus CD, I took Ply CD, I threw them out the window. I literally think I broke them in half. You know, a CD will cut you too when you break them. I probably about cut my finger. I broke their CDs in half and I threw them out the window because their music was a blueprint to the streets. How to stay in the streets, how to survive in the streets, how to, deal with the women that come to you when you in the streets, how to deal with people who cross you, how to deal with, just the work and how to move. It was the blueprint to street survival, but it was not the blueprint to exiting the streets and becoming a billionaire, becoming a clean money millionaire. It wasn't the blueprint to that. So I threw their stuff out the window and I started listening to audio podcasts and YouTube videos from 8 to 10 hours a day. Again, when I get on something, you're not going to outwork me. It's not many men that can say they put a podcast in their ear and they let that play for 8 to 10 hours a day. And that's what I did. And so I got so much insight, so much knowledge, so much wisdom from people who did not look like me, who had never done what I had done, had never gone through what I've gone through. All of these men was of other races. And you know, it was a couple that looked like me, but I grew up with them. You know what I mean by that is that's that's my uncle. Like TD Jakes, Les Brown, all them. That's my uncle. That's your homeboy. That's your daddy. You know. So I wanted to learn the secrets from, cause the people who look like me coming from where I'm from, they didn't have clean money success. You either overworked and underpaid on somebody's job, or you in the streets. Point blank period. It was no other. It was no authors. It was no motivational speakers that I knew, that I could talk to, that I could touch. I didn't even know life coaching was a thing. I learned that from a guy of another race. And it was a guy of another race. He said, listen, if you got knowledge, you could write a book. They taught stuff like that. And then the next thing he said, if you write a book and people have questions about your book, you can charge them to get on the phone with them. So here I had wrote this book and it wasn't selling all that great. But then women started asking me questions. Hey, I read your book. I got more questions. I said, oh, okay. $25 to get on the phone. I'm a life coach now. So there's no certification in life coach. You don't have to be certified. It's not regulated, like counseling and therapy with the state and with the government. So at this time, 2007, we in 2020, it definitely wasn't regulated. So I heard a guy say this on a teleconference, and I started telling the women who wanted to talk to me, ask me more questions, $25 an hour. And it was like, okay, cool, boom, here you go. So now I had the book, little money coming in, was not much, probably $1,000 a year. Maybe a little more, because I could sell them out the trunk. $1,000 to $2,000 a year. Can't live off that. But then I started coaching. So that started to turn into, anywhere from 25 to 300 a week. And the same way when I was in the streets working 21 hours out of the 24, I was working like that in my business. Now, that's a whole nother business video. So I'll do a video on how I earn millions of dollars as an entrepreneur and all of that. But this on how I matured as a man. So let me take you back. When I got into that Holy Bible, it gave me standards for living. So the way that showed up in my life is I wanted to remove all profanity. I didn't curse anyways, but just profane things, unclean things, I wanted to remove it from my life. So I didn't smoke because I saw the results of that. I didn't drink. I saw the results of that. I didn't curse. I didn't curse just because I wanted to look special to the ladies. So I wanted to be a man that just appeared to be different on the outside to all the women, because it give you a little edge. Like, wow, hold on, you in the streets, but you don't drink, you don't smoke, you don't curse? What? So it was intriguing, to women. But then when I came on this side and I got married, now I'm out of that game. So what it came down to is I had to define success. And so for me, success started to look like, and sure enough, success started to look like changing the world, living a life of purpose, using your gifts and allowing your gifts to impact the world so that when you are gone, and I've already done that. So people say, what's your goal? I'm living my goal. I'm my ancestors' dream, and I'm living my goal. Like, my goal is to continue doing what I'm doing. Like, it ain't nothing, it's nothing more. Like, just reach more people. If I've reached 100 million, if I've reached 1 billion, I want to reach 2 billion, 3 billion. I want to reach more people with a message, and not just a message, but an example of living, to be the goal, to be the lifestyle, not just to talk about it. And so that's what I started to realize about men, is a lot of men could talk about one thing. They could talk about something like how to make money, how to invest money, how to become a millionaire. and they could make money, but then they can't handle their alcohol. Smoke like a chimney, drink like a fish, and then don't know how to deal with women. So that represent a lack of balance to me. And I'm like, that's not success. Like, bro, you got money, but look at your eyes, man. You know what I mean? Like, you look sick by the eyes, bro. Like your eyes sinking way back into your face, and they bloodshot. Like your skin looking dry and pale, and your body withering away, or your body overly blowing up. Like one way or the other, either you withering away from all the stuff you putting in you up your nose and all this, or you getting too big from just eating anything you see on the seafood diet, seafood and eat it. And I just couldn't respect it. I'm like, man, I want balance. I want life, love, and business. I want to be the best husband that God done ever made. Because if I can't be the best husband, then I can't be the best father. So I want to be the best husband, and I want to be the best father, and I want to be the best businessman. And inside of husband and father and business, I want it to be rooted in purpose. I want it to be rooted and grounded with something that means something. So I'm not afraid to say that Jesus Christ is my Savior. I see so many men who, they may read a Bible, they may be Christian, but they're afraid to say they're Christian because there's so many people that don't believe in God. It's like, okay, if you don't believe in God, all right, more power to you. More power to you, but I guarantee your peace can't match mine. I guarantee that you ain't as blessed as me. If you don't believe, go ahead. But when you come over here and you see these blessings, you see this favor, you see this peace, when you see this over here, you're going to understand why I believe in Jesus Christ. You're going to understand why the Holy Bible changed my life. When you see that ain't no holes in it, when you see that everything together, when you see that it's all together, and everything I do that may not make conventional sense is a choice. Like, I don't worship money. I'm not trying to have $10 million sitting in the bank. For what? I use my money to change the world. And I'm not worried about leaving millions of dollars to my sons because I'm giving them millions of dollars worth of knowledge, worth of wisdom and understanding. I'm giving them the wisdom to get wealth, so that if I left them with $0, they still can become a millionaire because they have the principles for success, which is integrity, which is character, which is ambition and patience and love and self-love and compassion and understanding and wisdom and forgiveness. You see, they have the principles of success. So when the Holy Bible gave me the tools that I needed to work with and the parameters that I needed to keep my life inside of, now I just had to use my gifts to the best of my ability. And what happened is the byproduct of integrity and character with ambition and persistence turned into me starting over 10 companies, turned into creating over 50 streams of income, turned into me making $8.50 to $9.50 an hour, working for almost 5 years in a group home as a counselor in a group home, to running my own companies, building my personal brand, and earning millions of dollars, to the point where what I was making in a year, I started getting checks that was 2, 3, 4 times that. Just like one payment, like one check for a sponsorship or an endorsement. or for a deal, that I had done in business, and then doing business deals into seven figures, doing 7-figure business deals, that would set me up and help me get a house for my family, like to get my family out of the hood, with no protection, where you don't have a gate, to be able to live in a house with, from the hood to a 5-6 bedroom house, pool, gated, 24-hour security patrol driving around, on top of can't get in unless you call and let me know you coming, and I tell the gate yay or nay. So to go from there to there, and yeah, it was bumps in the road just because of financial illiteracy, not knowing how to spend the money that I was being blessed with. And my wife at the same time too, coming from no money, coming from, being the daughter of an immigrant, and, then became a naturalized citizen, so she had a learning curve too, just learning how to deal with, abundance, deal with not having to miss a meal, deal with being able to buy whatever you want to buy. There's a learning curve, so we had to learn that. But at the same time, the wisdom for that was in the Holy Bible, where it says the borrower becomes servant to the lender. So once we got that knowledge, now it's just about climbing out of the hole that you have put yourself in. When it tells you to be a good steward, when it tells you to store up, he showed you with Joseph how he dealt with the abundant years and prepared him to be able to deal with the famine. And so you look at this biblical, the men with the 10 talents, the men with the 1 talent, the 5 talent, and the 10 talents, and seeing how God wants you to invest your money and multiply. So biblical wisdom is all I use. It's all I use. Like, I look at some stuff that relate to the industry. This guy that told me, if you write a book, it was a teleconference, I never talked to him in person. So if you write a book, you could become a coach. And then if you become a coach and you're an author, he say there's such things as a timely pitch. So when Chris Brown and Rihanna happened, my book was on relationships, and one chapter was on that type of relationship. I pitched myself to Oprah. So that's how I got on Oprah, to tell my story, because I had lived through that when I was in college, when I was a toxic, controlling boyfriend. So I exposed myself, told my story. Oprah didn't stamp my book, but the same day I talked to Tyra Banks' producer, and they said, come to New York next week. This was a Thursday. They said, we want you in New York Tuesday with your book in hand as a guest expert. So here I was at 25 years old, had just went live on Oprah at 25, no agent, no manager, no publicist, no team, no mentor, no nothing. I sent all my own pitches. My pitches was better than publicists that was being paid $20,000 a month, because I'm a writer. So I was able to write pitches, craft pitches. So guess what? After doing that, that turned into my PR company. So now I'm an author, a coach, a speaker. Now I'm a publicist too. I'm charging people. Then started building social media, and the list goes on. But it was all biblical wisdom with application, with standards, with morals, with values. And I stopped making excuses. I stopped blaming other people. I stopped taking shortcuts, because if you take a shortcut, you will be cut short. And I said, I want a healthy life across the board, pristine. And I'm still a work in progress. I'm still trying to eat better. I'm still trying to manage money better. So you're never perfect, but you can reach a space to where if you chasing perfection, you're going to catch excellence along the way, in the words of Vince Lombardi. So, hey, this is a long video, but this is how I do, man. I do an hour. I could give you another hour on top of this, but this, hopefully, share this with your brother, with your cousin, with your nephew, with your uncle. Tell them, listen to it when they got an hour to spare. Listen to the whole thing. It's going to be something they're going to get that they can apply to their life and help them change their life for the better. Hey, this is Tony Gaskin. God bless you. We'll talk soon.